I had always been drawn to history, to the untold stories hidden behind layers of time. When I first heard about Westwick Manor, I knew I had uncovered its secrets. The mansion stood like a ghost at the edge of town, its once grand facade now marred by time, neglect, and a dark legacy. Westwick Manor had been the estate of Charles Westwick, a philanthropist whose name had been associated with both charity and whispers of corruption. He had disappeared years ago, and rumors of strange happenings had followed his name ever since. But it wasn't just Charles Westwick who intrigued me. It was his wife, Evelyn, whose sudden disappearance had never been explained. As an aspiring historian, the allure of rare documents and artifacts lured me to the manor. I checked into a nearby bed and breakfast, unpacking my things with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The town was small, and the people here were just as much a part of the manor's history as the mansion itself. Everyone had their stories, their whispers about the past, but no one knew what really happened to Evelyn. I was determined to find out. The bed and breakfast was quaint and quiet, its walls lined with faded pictures of a past long gone. The owner, an elderly woman with sharp eyes, gave me a knowing look when I mentioned Westwick Manor. She didn't offer any advice or warnings, but simply nodded. "Be careful," she said in a hushed tone, the words carrying an unspoken weight. That evening, after settling in, I made my way to the manor. The mansion loomed in the distance, a shadowed silhouette against the dimming sky. As I approached, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The wind didn't whistle through the trees, and the world seemed to hold its breath around this forsaken place. I wasn't alone for long, though. A figure stepped out from the shadows, a man in his 50s with graying hair, dressed in a faded suit. He greeted me with a soft smile. "Are you here for the tour?" he asked, his voice carrying a strange note of formality. I nodded, surprised by his sudden appearance. "Yes, I'm Claire Donovan. I'm interested in the history of the manor." "Ah, Evelyn's history," the man said with a knowing look. "I'm Robert, the caretaker. It's been some time since anyone came for the tour. Follow me." I followed Robert to the large, iron gates of the estate, the hinges creaking as they groaned open. He led me through the front door, the smell of dust and mildew hanging in the air. The manor was cold, even though the night was warm. The wooden floors creaked beneath our feet, and the walls seemed to whisper with the weight of untold stories. As we walked through the house, Robert told me the history of the place. Charles Westwick had built the manor in the early 1900s, but had fallen into disrepair after his mysterious disappearance. His wife, Evelyn, had lived here too, but she vanished without a trace after a violent argument with her husband. The townspeople had always speculated that Charles had murdered her, but there had never been any evidence to prove it. Robert's words were filled with a strange mix of reverence and caution. "Evelyn was a strong woman," Robert said, his voice low, almost reverent. "She tried to expose Charles for his corrupt dealings, but no one believed her. After she disappeared, people forgot about her, or pretended to. But there are those of us who remember." The air grew heavier as we walked deeper into the house, and I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Later that evening, after Robert had left me to my exploration, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The house creaked and groaned around me, the faintest of whispers echoing through the dark hallways. I had been drawn to the upper floors by something I couldn't explain, an inexplicable urge to see what lay beyond the dust-covered doors. The air grew colder as I ascended the grand staircase, the flickering light from my flashlight casting strange shadows on the walls. Suddenly, I heard it, a loud bang, followed by a crash that echoed through the manor. My heart raced as I turned toward the source of the noise. It came from upstairs, from a room at the far end of the hallway. Against my better judgment, I moved forward, each step heavier than the last. The door to the room was ajar, and as I stepped closer, I could feel something watching me, something that didn't belong in this world. I reached out to push the door open further, but before I could touch it, a cold, invisible hand wrapped around my wrist. I gasped, struggling to free myself. The grip tightened, pulling me backward, and I stumbled, almost falling. Panic surged within me. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The cold was unbearable, seeping into my very bones. My heart pounded in my chest as I fought to break free. In a desperate burst of energy, I wrenched myself away and bolted down the hallway, my footsteps echoing through the empty house. I turned a corner, stumbling into the attic, the door slamming shut behind me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I backed away, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Then I saw it. There, in the corner of the attic, was a small wooden chest. I hesitated for only a moment before rushing to it. Inside, I found a hidden diary, its pages yellow with age. The handwriting was elegant, though frantic in places. As I read, I could hear her voice, soft but clear. I was locked away, like a prisoner in my own home. The diary read, "Charles was not the man I married. He betrayed me. He betrayed everyone. But I couldn't let him destroy everything. He wanted to silence me, but I won't be silenced. The truth will come out." The air grew colder, the shadows in the attic stretching toward me. And then I saw her, a woman, her form pale and translucent, standing before me. Her face was contorted with rage, her eyes burning with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. "You're the first to listen," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "They thought I was crazy, but they will know the truth now. Charles murdered me, and you will help me seek justice." I trembled before her, the terror threatening to overwhelm me. "No, I don't know how to help you." Evelyn's spirit floated closer, her face inches from mine. "You have the truth now. Tell them what happened. Tell them the truth about Charles Westwick, and my soul will finally be at rest." The spirit's eyes softened for a moment, and I felt a strange sense of empathy for her. But the fear was still there, gnawing at me, and I knew that I had to get out of this place. "I'll do it," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I'll make sure they know the truth." With that promise, Evelyn's form began to fade, her anger dissipating like a storm passing. She smiled faintly, and then she was gone. I didn't stay any longer. My legs were weak as I made my way out of the manor, the diary clutched tightly in my hands. The truth had been revealed, and with it, I would make sure the world knew about the man who had been both a benefactor and a murderer. The local authorities were skeptical at first, but when they examined the evidence, they could no longer ignore the truth. Charles Westwick had indeed been involved in a series of dark dealings. The case of Evelyn's disappearance was reopened, and with it, the haunting presence that had lingered in Westwick Manor was finally laid to rest. The ghost of Evelyn never returned, and for the first time in many years, the manor stood in silence, no longer haunted by the spirit of a woman who had been wronged. I left Westwick Manor that night, my heart still racing, but with the knowledge that justice had been served. The truth had been uncovered, and the vengeful spirit of Westwick Manor was finally at peace. I'd always been fascinated by Charleston's haunting past. It was hard to ignore, given the city's deep roots in both history and the supernatural. As a law student, I found myself drawn to the oldest building in the city, the Charleston Courthouse. For my thesis, I was investigating the legal practices of the 19th century, and the courthouse seemed like the perfect place to start. But what I found there was not what I had expected. It was a late evening when I first stumbled upon the case. I had been sifting through dusty, forgotten records in the courthouse's archives, my eyes heavy from hours of reading. The file in front of me was old, so old, the paper had yellowed, the ink faint. It was a trial from 1876, a case that had been long buried in the annals of history. The judge, Thomas Hawthorne, was a name I didn't recognize, and there was something unnerving about the way his case was documented. Or rather, the way it wasn't. Judge Hawthorne had been responsible for sentencing an innocent man, Thomas Calloway, to death for a crime he didn't commit. Yet, strangely, there were no records of Calloway's execution. There was only a final note from the judge's chamber stating that the case was closed, and thereafter, no mention of Hawthorne's actions. What was even stranger was that the judge had vanished shortly after the case. No one saw him again. Rumors began to swirl around the courthouse, whispers of ghostly apparitions and unsettling events in the building after dark. The most chilling rumor was that the judge's soul was tormented by the injustice he had committed. Curiosity gripped me. I couldn't resist. I had to learn more about the trial, about Hawthorne's disappearance. My thesis could wait. There was a mystery here, one that needed to be solved. The courthouse had always been eerie at night. The creaking floors and the smell of age gave it an unsettling charm. But tonight, it felt different. It felt wrong. I arrived after hours, the only light coming from the few flickering bulbs overhead. The building felt colder than usual, the air thick with something I couldn't quite place. As I walked through familiar halls, I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. Every step I took echoed as if someone or something was following me. The archives were in the back, through a narrow corridor that led to the older and used parts of the courthouse. As I pushed open the door to the records room, a chill ran through me. The room was unnaturally cold, and I noticed the faintest whispers, like the rustling of paper, coming from the farthest corner. I thought it was just the wind, until I turned the corner. There, standing in the doorway to the courtroom, was a figure. It was a man, though something about him was wrong. He wore an old, tattered judge's robe, and his face was pale, gaunt, almost skeletal. His eyes, dark and hollow, locked onto mine, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. He didn't speak at first, only stared at me with an intensity that made my heart race. Then, in a voice so soft it felt like a whisper in my soul, he spoke. "Justice is overdue." His words echoed in my mind, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I wanted to run, to get out of that room, but my feet were frozen to the floor. And then it happened. The room around me seemed to warp and shift. The air grew colder, the walls stretched, and the sounds of distant voices filled the room. I was no longer in the courthouse, as it was now. I was transported to a courtroom from a different time. It was 1876. I could feel it in the air, the tension, the heaviness. The courtroom was dimly lit, with shadows looming in every corner. A man, gaunt and frail-looking, stood before the judge, his hands shackled in front of him. I recognized him instantly. Thomas Calloway. His face was a mix of fear and desperation, his eyes darting to the judge who was seated before him. Judge Thomas Hawthorne sat high on the bench, his face stern, his eyes unblinking. The room was silent, save for the occasional rustle of the paper or the faint tapping of the judge's gavel. Calloway pleaded for his life. "Please, Your Honor, I am innocent. I never killed that man." Silence. Judge Hawthorne's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Your lies will not save you. You have been sentenced for your crimes." Calloway's voice cracked. "But I didn't do it. I swear." The judge didn't flinch. He didn't even seem to care. His gavel came down with a harsh thud, sealing the man's fate. "I hereby sentence you to death by hanging." I wanted to scream, to rush forward and stop the trial, but I was frozen in place, unable to move. I could feel the weight of the injustice in the air, thick and suffocating. The condemned man's sobs were drowned out by the echo of the gavel strike. Then, as quickly as it had started, the vision vanished, and I was back in the courtroom of the present. The ghostly figure of Judge Hawthorne stood before me, his eyes now filled with regret and guilt. He was no longer the stern, unfeeling man I had seen in the vision. He was broken, a mere shadow of the man he had once been. "Please," he whispered, "you must help me. I cannot rest until the truth is known. The man I condemned was innocent, and I have been condemned for it." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "What do you want me to do?" Hawthorne's figure flickered, his form wavering like a candle in the wind. "Find the truth, the evidence, the letter that was hidden." Without another word, the ghost faded into the shadows, leaving me alone in the courtroom once more. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I knew what I had to do. I spent the next few hours combing through the courthouse's records, piecing together the clues. The truth was hidden deep within the archives, buried beneath decades of dust and neglect. I found it, a letter from a prison guard to the governor, detailing how Thomas Calloway had been innocent all along. The letter had been ignored, lost in the shuffle, buried to protect the reputation of those involved in the trial. The courthouse suddenly groaned, shaking violently as if reacting to the truth I had uncovered. I ran back to the courtroom, the letter clutched in my hand, and I stood before the phantom judge. "I've found it. I said, my voice trembling. The letter, the truth. The ghost of Judge Hawthorne appeared before me once more. His form was clearer now, more solid, as if the truth had given him the strength to manifest fully. His hollow eyes softened, and for the first time he looked peaceful. "Thank you," he whispered. "Justice is finally served." And with that, the ghost vanished, his spirit freed from the torment that had bound him for so long. The courthouse was silent again. The weight that had pressed down on me since I first stepped inside was gone, but the feeling of unease lingered. I left the courthouse that night, the letter still in my hand, knowing that I had uncovered a truth that had been hidden for far too long. But even as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the courthouse still held secrets of other souls who had yet to find peace. As I turned the corner, I heard a distant whisper, faint but clear, "Thank you." I shivered, but I kept walking. Some things were better left unexplored.